Okay, so it's recording. So I'm letting everyone in. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi. If everyone can unmute themselves, that would be great. And we are going to start at 10 on the dot. So welcome everyone. Good morning. I'm very excited to be here today, and today's topic is something that I'm really excited about and keen on listening more and learning more. I'm going to hand it over to Miss Alicia Davenport, who is the naturopath at City Osteopathy and Physiology. Alicia, take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. So yes, my name is Alicia. I work as the naturopath at City Osteo and Physio. I have been, just a little bit about myself just before I move on, if you don't mind, but I've been working as a naturopath for 15 years now, and I have a special interest in children's health and digestion, and especially neurological disorders. And so I have been doing this for many years, as I was saying, but what I would like to talk about today is to bring some awareness, especially to the importance that our gut microbiome plays. And I want to share with you what I often see in my clinic is that there are a lot of people with these common complaints that can easily be supported if we use treatment for the microbiome. So I just wanted to firstly start out by talking, well, what is the gut microbiome? Well, our bodies are actually made up of tens of trillions of cells that we have in our gut, and we harbor 100 trillion bacteria. So this means for every gene in your genome, there are 100 bacterial ones. So this is essentially what our microbiome is, and it has a huge impact on our health. When we're talking about the gut microbiome, we're talking about the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses that are actually located in the gut. And what I often see in the clinic is that many of these like diseases and that are seemingly unrelated to the digestive issues are actually caused by issues with the microbiome being out of balance. And this is what I wanted to discuss in more detail today. So just some easy graphics for you all to look at. So this is looking at simply, there's probably 9 key steps that the microbiome is responsible for. This is looking at how it actually modulates or plays a huge role in our immune function. So a lot of people will know now, but our gut wall houses about 70% of the cells that make up our immune system. And this is why digestive issues that are associated with like allergies, poor immunity, and autoimmune diseases are interrelated. Our gut is always working super hard to support our immune system. It helps with breaking down food and absorbing nutrients and keeping out toxins, and it actually makes its own nutrients as well. So it's a lot of work that it's doing daily to actually support our immune function. And what I often see is that one of the main or first reported things that when I'm working with gut health in children is that the parents will often comment that that they're not getting runny noses or colds or flus or things like that. It's one of the first things that a lot of people will comment on. But as you can see here too, like our microbiome actually does make our own vitamins. So if we can keep our gut bacteria healthy, then that will give us more space to be able to make a lot of these essential nutrients. Particular bacteria that you may all be aware of is called bifidobacteria, and that's one of the common like good bacteria that a lot of people will find in probiotics that we buy, from the grocery store or from of iHerb, these types of things. But the bifidobacteria actually make essential vitamins like B12, biotin, folic acid, and vitamin K2. And so that is helping with, a lot of different areas in biochemistry in the body alone. And as you can see here, it regulates metabolism and blood sugar control. And the microbiome or the gut bacteria are doing that because our gut bacteria will thrive on simply what we feed them. So if we feed them junk, and the bad bugs will flourish. And then if the bad bugs are flourishing, our fat regulating hormones like insulin become out of balance or out of whack, and this leaves us craving more junk foods. So there's a bit of a vicious cycle that happens there. So essentially our microbiome can be made up of what we would call like pathogenic bacteria, so disease-causing bacteria, or commensal, which is our good bacteria. Okay. So our microbiome also plays a huge role in actually regulating our bowel flow or motility. And just simply put, lack of our good bacteria or commensal bacteria can lead to constipation. And often I see in patients that they're having a lot of fiber, they're having extra fiber as a supplement, they're drinking loads of water, even in kids, but they're still having issues with constipation. And what I tend to find when we test their microbiome and their bacteria levels is that they have several types of good bacteria that are consistently low in their bowels. So I will often directly look for that. One particular example of this is that several types of E. coli exist that are part of our normal flora of the human gut. And one of the actual functions of this is actually helping with regulating motility. A lot of you may be thinking or may be aware of the pathogenic E. coli that causes food poisoning, and this is a different type of E. coli, two totally separate ones. But often when we give the beneficial E. coli in a probiotic, this can help with modulating bowel flow and helping with constipation. So that's just one example. Nutrient absorption. So, when we look at how we absorb nutrients, there's all our good bacteria living in our gut microbiome will help to break down nutrients. And these same good bacteria also help to keep inflammation down in the gut and protect the gut barrier so that we don't end up with permeability in the gut barrier, in the gut wall. It's commonly known as leaky gut. And I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of leaky gut before, but when issues like leaky gut start to happen, this is when we can become more sensitive to our everyday foods, like eggs and possibly even things like nuts and things like that, and we become more and more sensitive. Okay, so coming up to our other roles that the microbiome plays. In general, when we have a good amount of diverse, so lots of different types of good bacteria in the gut, this will in general help to keep inflammation down. It controls inflammation, like I was saying, and it helps to ward against the pathogenic bacteria or the bad bacteria from overexpanding in the gut. It's really important, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, to keep inflammation down over the whole body, but especially in the gut, because there's lots of different chronic illnesses like inflammatory bowel disease and IBS. All of those conditions are linked back to bacteria and inflammation in the bowels, and also it affects the rest of our body. So our needs to be maintained at a pH of 7.4. Otherwise, it'll start to pull minerals out of the bone tissue. So we don't want that to happen, especially during childhood when we're growing at a rapid pace. The other area that the microbiome plays a really key role in is helping to regulate our moods. So besides our brain, our gut is the only organ with its own nervous system, which is quite fascinating. And our gut nerve cells produce about 95% of serotonin, which is our happy hormone. And every class of neurotransmitter in your brain also resides in your gut. So your gut, in fact, contains more neurotransmitters than your brain. And this is why there's a wide range of gut-brain like symptoms or disturbances, including like things like, you know, depression that can go hand in hand with digestive symptoms, or, you know, unhealthy eating patterns, or using food as a reward, or addictive tendencies with food and drink. So we can commonly see that interrelated as well. And I often just see as a general thing that normally when people do have quite chronic digestive symptoms, especially in children, there's a lot of anxiety that goes hand in hand with that as well. And as you can see here with the last one, you know, our gut, by helping to keep a healthy barrier, keep inflammation down, keeping the right types of bacteria in there, also helps us with detoxifying and making sure that we're detoxing out all of the toxins that we're getting from our environment. So I just wanted to give a little brief background on like, where do these bacteria come from? Just for those who may not be aware, but our microbes come mainly from our mothers, and babies end up with a very different portfolio of skin and gut bacteria depending on the delivery or the way they were born. So those who are born naturally harbour a more diverse array of bacteria, which resemble those of the mother's birth canal, including several species that are important for digestion and for immunity. So, you know, what we know is that half the bacteria in the birth canal is actually made up of lactobacillus. So those that are delivered by C-section are colonized by a less diverse array of bacteria. And they found that, including some like Staphylococcus that are picked up from the hospital environment, is more common in those that are delivered by C-section. So, you know, it's for this reason that mothers of C-section babies, if they can, are encouraged to breastfeed following the delivery for as long as possible, because that will help with getting the gut bacteria established and back on track. And there was one American study that showed administering a probiotic of lactobacillus to C-section babies can reduce their risk of developing allergies long term. And it was interesting to note that the same treatment had no effect on the natural born babies. So that's one way that, you know, that you could put like a little bit of the lactobacillus probiotic on the nipple when breastfeeding. And if the babies had been born by C-section. Ideally, you know, in a perfect world, the focus would be on preconception care. I guess that's one of the key points that I did want to, you know, bring awareness to, is that, you know, increasing the good bacteria and the health of the whole environment of the microbiome prior to conception. You know, ideally, you know, putting together, you know, an individualized protocol for the mum for at least 6 to 12 weeks before conception would be helpful in an ideal world. So when we look next at, like, then what is disrupting these bacteria? You know, commonly I'm finding more and more, you know, that there's less and less of these good bacteria present. And unfortunately, in this day and age, there's a lot of things that, that can disrupt our good bacteria. And, you know, I read one statistic that, you know, over 287 chemicals, I mean, that's pretty precise, but that the average newborn that the average newborn is born with in their umbilical cord. So that is a huge amount of toxins that we're already born with. And then what's actually impacting that is the delivery mode of birth. And then if we're breastfed or bottle fed, that can impact our gut bacteria. And then obviously, you know, things like our diet, so high sugars and refined carbs as I alluded to previously, will feed the wrong types of bacteria in the gut, and things like fungus that we want to try to avoid, that depletes our digestion and our microbiome. And then chemicals more from the environment, we're looking at things like chlorine. That's very common in our drinking water. So chlorine has a direct negative impact on our good bacteria. It will actually kill our good bacteria. So, you know, putting a good filter on our water, our drinking water, making sure that it actually will detox things or filter things like chlorine and fluoride is really important. And then our everyday medications, like, you know, I've stated here antibiotics, but actually there's a lot of other medications that are very common that will disrupt the gut bacteria as well. So these are things like anti-inflammatories, acid blocking drugs, which are extremely common these days, steroids, which are also extremely common, even things like the oral contraceptive pill. So, you know, a lot of women will be on the oral contraceptive pill, which will reduce good bacteria. And, you know, there are sometimes, you know, that they may just come off the oral contraceptive pill, you know, in time just to have a baby. So all of these things then will contribute towards the baby's gut microbiome. And why, you know, working with preconception support can be extremely helpful. Okay, so the whole aim of when we're looking at the microbiome is that we want diverse gut bacteria, so as many types of species as possible, because looking at lots of different species of gut bacteria equals a healthy ecosystem, as you can see there. But so commonly our gut houses approximately about 700 species of bacteria, and our bacteria weigh approximately around 1.5 kilos. So, you know, the more and more that we can try to increase the diversity through, you know, nutrition and healthy living and reducing toxins, the better. The less diverse the gut bacteria become, what happens usually is that when we get less bacteria, we will be more inflamed. The inflammation will lead to things like leaky gut, poor digestion, and poor detoxification. So what I wanted to show you is a graph actually of what that actually looks like. So it's kind of like a vicious circle. So when our gut bacteria are out of balance, the low diversity causes inflammation and oxidative stress. So all oxidative stress simply means is that it's causing more toxins throughout the body, and this in turn is, you know, causing the gut permeability, which then leads to more chronic issues, including affecting more and more our immune response. So this is the kind of picture that's happening with the low diversity in gut bacteria. So depending on factors, like even within this graph, you know, these kind of low diversity of gut bacteria will be different, will result in different issues or ill health for each person. This next slide is actually showing us, don't worry if you can't see so much like the really fine writing there or anything like that. My whole idea of showing you this is just to give you a visualization of I guess what our gut bacteria would look like, and also it gives you an idea of you know, when we're looking at using testing techniques to look at the microbiome, this is what it would look like. This as you can see, if I can draw your attention just to the left there, where you can see the pink color the whole way along there. So this is actually an overexpansion of one particular opportunistic bacteria. And this particular bacteria is accounting, in this 8-year-old's gut, is accounting for 40% of the gut bacteria. Okay, so this, you can't see it, it's cut off, but it's called B. vulgaris. And this particular type of bacteria is actually thought to be responsible for the development of inflammation specifically, and immune responses, so negative immune responses in the gut. And it has been linked to inflammatory bowel disease and IBS. So yeah, this particular 8-year-old didn't have or wasn't diagnosed with IBD or IBS, but was experiencing constipation and issues with concentration, and their diet was extremely poor, in that he was quite a fussy eater as well. So, my main idea around showing you this is to show you that when we have low diversity, you can see that it's normally like 1 or 2 bacteria that are overexpanding in that particular chronoplot, and that a lot of the good bacteria we're seeing less and less of. And usually in this type of scenario, the person will have very low or thin gut lining, and that's actually the case for this particular patient as well. Their gut lining was 0.004%, which is very, very thin. And normally we would want to see those levels anywhere from like 1.5 to 3%. So we can identify more specifically what we need to do for each particular person. But this is just to give you a visual of what that can look like. So from a holistic approach, how would we look at treating the microbiome? Because this is really important, because not everyone who's coming in is necessarily coming in with digestive issues. But there are a group of people that are as well. So from this approach, I just want to go through with you some really easy tips that you can use as well. So this is just a warning in case you're using this time as a tea break, or having morning tea or something like that. I'm about to pull up a stool chart, so to speak. So this is just a bit of warning to look away now if you want to. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Bristol stool chart at all, but this is a really super simple chart that I use a lot in the clinic, just to really be able to identify what is happening for that person, because what might be normal for one person may be totally different for another. So, when we're looking at gut health in children, one of the first things I will ask about is, if the parent, does know about, any kind of signs or symptoms. So, when we're looking at the Bristol stool chart, type 4 is what we want the stool to look like a sausage or a snake, all in one piece, not too soft, but not too hard either. And what we're actually aiming for, especially for working with microbiome health, is for 1 to 2 bowel movements per day. Like, that's the healthy way. And there should be no sense of urgency before going to the toilet. It should sink to the bottom, and it shouldn't take too long on the toilet as well. Signs that there are digestive issues is obviously if it's taking too long, or constipation. That is a sign of constipation. We will see from type 1 to type 3 on the Bristol stool chart there. That's all signaling constipation. Anything from type 5 to type 7 is on the looser side and is indicative of diarrhea. And just other signs to look for is we don't want it to float. It shouldn't be too oily. That can be a sign of not absorbing your fats in the diet. And there shouldn't be flatulence or gas. So these are like key signs that are simple to observe, although they can be pretty smelly. So this is an easy way of evaluating your child's bowel activity. And it can just lead to many clues to the health of their digestive system and clues to the health of the body in general. It's a good starting point just to look at the Bristol stool chart. Okay, and obviously any signs of blood or mucus or anything like that, there is poor gut health. And yeah, it shouldn't be anything like that. Okay, so obviously the first sign when people think about working with, digestion and gut bacteria is they normally think of, digestive issues first and foremost. And because these are the most obvious signs that there's something wrong with our digestion and that we need to support, our gut microbiome and absorption. But these are actually what you can see on the slide here are all other imbalances that can be linked back to issues with the microbiome in babies and children. So we've got things like behavioural issues, sensory issues, skin allergies like eczema, recurrent ear infections, food intolerances, things, even things like fussy eating, asthma, OCD type tendencies. So there's lots of conditions that can actually be supported by helping with looking at actually seeing what's going on as far as what types are in there, is there leaky gut present, the environment, what types of bacteria are reflecting what. So yeah, you can see here that our gut bacteria are linked to a variety of medical conditions. And, you know, even, for example, if a child has a tendency to put on weight, it could be an imbalance in the two major groups of bacteria that we have, Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes, because they can actually influence our body weight as well. So, you know, making sure that there's enough fiber, prebiotic foods, all of these things, and actually having a look and digging a little bit deeper to see what's actually going on. Well, for example, behavioural issues can have been linked to like opportunistic pathogenic bacteria like high strep. Reoccurrent ear infections can be linked to issues around low gut bacteria and food allergies, but also things like overgrowth of fungal issues as well. And eczema in general can be linked to low levels of lactobacillus. So you can see that there are common patterns, but I would have to say too that it doesn't always go the way that it's what we would always assume to be a common pattern as well. So it's always well worth testing. So just following on from, you know, just bringing awareness, I guess, to the fact that digestive, like microbiome imbalances don't always present as digestive complaints. We have here that, you know, our brain influences our gut functioning, and so too does our mood and behavior depend on our gut bacteria. So this is why, you know, issues presenting around ADHD and ADD are linked back to our gut bacteria. So like how this can actually happen is that our relationship, this relationship of our gut and mood actually rests on our immune signals traveling from the gut to the brain, on the interaction between microbiome or the gut bacteria and the gut wall, and on the contact between the microbes and the nerve terminals in the intestines. So any kind of alteration, what this graph is actually saying is that any type of alteration, like of inflammatory responses caused by what we would call an imbalance in the gut bacteria, or what some refer to as dysbiosis, promotes a status of, you know, chronic inflammation that then is associated with mood and behavior changes, and greater stress intolerance or reactivity, and greater stress associated disease incidents, like even anxiety, that can sometimes present as poor behavior as well. So many of these factors have also been associated with the risk of developing ADHD as the example, you know, showing us that they're suggesting that there's a link between the microbiota and this disorder. And, you know, this is something that I do commonly see in the clinic, is that working with kids' gut health, ensuring that even these small things, sometimes people don't realize that they're even going to the toilet once a day, that their bowels could actually be quite compacted, and that the, you know, the feces or the stool that's coming out is actually still old stool, you know, and you know, it's actually not that much of a surprise that that would then affect your moods or your child's moods. So you know, this is one thing just to kind of keep in mind as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is talking about how our diet actually plays a part in our microbiome. And the key thing that I would say just leading into this is that, as I just stated earlier on, that our gut bacteria really do thrive on what we feed them. So this is really the whole key to making diet a major part in gut health. It's not just simply trying to give probiotics. It's also about the environment, and the nutrition plays a huge role as well. So I don't know, I'm sure most of you parents are very familiar with this kind of look on the face with kids. This type of thing, looking at fussy eating is actually very much linked to our gut bacteria. So there's been actually a lot of research in this area, and researchers have made quite a strong link with an imbalance of certain unhealthy bacteria to cravings of particular foods that grow that particular bacteria or fungi. So, the poor nutrition and gut flora leads to common nutrient imbalances. And this makes it extremely hard for the child. They become more fussy, as they seek more quick foods like sugars and carbs just to help to give them energy, because they're lacking these key nutrients. And this is quite a vicious cycle as well, in this regard. So, we've got two kind of things playing at hand here. We've got, when we have a poor gut microbiota, there's poor gut diversity there, the wrong types of bacteria growing, it is more common for our children to be fussy eaters. But then what goes along with that restriction of foods is that the nutrients or our vitamins, key essential fatty acids and amino acids are often low as well. And just to note, like, these are the foods that you can see on this slide here. These are the common foods that I hear parents say over and over again, when their child's coming in with digestive issues. Usually it might be behaviour related as well, or just even if it's not a behavioural issue as such, it could simply be that they have issues with concentrating, really poor attention span, or issues around processing the information. But usually their food or their diet is restricted to normally around about 5 foods if they had their way. And it's normally what I would call all the white mushy foods. So, the white mushy foods are exactly what you can see, like, chicken nuggets, bread, even things like just rice crackers, hot chips, these types of things. And, some of the key nutrients, it's normally the same vitamins that are low over and over again. And this is things like zinc. So, when we're low in zinc, it can actually directly affect fussy eating, because zinc is really important in helping us to be able to taste our foods. So when we're low in zinc, zinc can actually, all our foods can become quite bland tasting. So it's that vicious cycle again. So we really need to look at, working with the gut bacteria, trying to increase diversity and personalizing it for that particular child, looking at any kind of key nutrients that could be low. And once we've done that, then we slowly bridge as far as nutrition and the diet. I find that I get a lot better results if we can try to bridge a little bit and try to build up the vitamins and nutrients first before we just go in and change the whole diet, because that could be, World War I on our hands with that. So we need to just take it easy. But it is something that I think we need to pay attention to and make sure that it doesn't, because this can be something that can slowly increase, like the fussiness, the restrictive eating can be quite slow and quite silent over time. And so this is definitely something that I think, the earlier the better, like the younger the better, to just try to stop it before it begins. Why I was putting together this webinar, I came across, a case report of a 14-year-old boy who actually suffered permanent blind spots in his vision from like severe restrictive eating. So this was reported only last year in December, and it's quite common knowledge, I guess, that, you know, when we have a poor diet, that it will affect our cardiovascular health and obesity and cancer, and that these types of conditions are associated with eating junk food. But, you know, poor nutrition can also permanently damage the nervous system as well. And these can come out in things like anxiety, inability to concentrate, and as you can see by this case report, it can particularly affect our vision. So yeah, this particular case report was reported in the Annals of Internal Medicine, and yeah, so this is, the pictures here are actually of his whole diet, which consisted of hot chips, Pringles, white bread, sausage rolls, and processed ham. So that's all he was living off of. And what actually came out from this was that the teenager was, this extreme fussy eating was also, and it often does, he was having issues as far as sensory issues with food that went undetected. So, you know, with that, you know, these sensory issues were allowed to increase, and also he became more and more deficient in all of our key vitamins and nutrients, like I was talking to you about before. So, you know, they did report that he was very low in vitamin D, which is also another very common one. He was, this is actually quite unusual, but he was abnormally high in zinc, and he was low in selenium and low in copper. And alarmingly so, at age 14, he was starting to lose bone. So, you know, I mean, this clearly is, you know, a really extreme case of fussy eating. But, I mean, this shouldn't really be happening at all, you know, when we have so much fresh veggies and food available. I mean, this happened in, this teenager was from the UK. So, you know, it is something that I feel that with how the food industry is set up, you know, it's not set up to try to help people get better nutrition. It's a business and it's there to make money. And so I feel that these cases, even though they may not be as severe as what this particular teenager's was, is that it is becoming more and more common on less severe, you know, in less severe cases. And there is a commonality that I'm seeing far too often with all of the really low vitamins and nutrients and things like that, and issues with the gut microbiome as well. So, you know, I often recommend to my patients a program to help with building up their gut bacteria, but also work hand in hand with nutrition. And a lot of my patients are quite fussy eaters. So this is feedback that I've gotten from, you know, one of my patients. As you can see here, you know, they're talking about 7 months ago, you know, their son, who's 6 years old, he wouldn't eat anything but junk. And we couldn't get him to eat anything homemade at all. And as you can see just from that statement alone, this isn't something that happens overnight. You know, when we're working with gut health, it takes time. And also, you know, working with nutrition and changing the diet takes time. It's not about just simply the next day, you know, everything changes. It's little bit by little bit, and, you know, working so that we can, you know, make this as we're trying to make this a positive experience for the child. You know, we're trying to, we don't want them to look at it and think that this is traumatic for them. So it's all about bridging and helping them, getting them involved in the kitchen, teaching them about healthy foods, and with breaking down sensory issues, if that is part of your child's, you know, symptom pictures, and, you know, working with getting them playing with textures and, you know, eating healthy foods again. So, you know, within that process, you know, I normally look at functional bloods as well. So, you know, looking at addressing any kind of vitamin deficiencies as well, especially the, you know, zinc, B6, B12. B12 is often low, iron is often low, and vitamin D also. And then we look at a process called food progression. So this is just a term used where we slowly adapt their current diet to a healthier version. So, you know, as I was saying before, like a lot of kids love chicken nuggets, and, you know, if they're becoming extremely fussy and, you know, there's tantrums around that and all they want to eat is chicken nuggets, we slowly try to progress them to, you know, chicken nuggets, and then the ultimate end stage would be baked whole pieces of chicken. Like that's one example of that, you know, so that they're getting a better version of the food that they're eating as well. And also we want to, just another tip is in taking into consideration is that we work with the child's preferred textures of foods. So, you know, to begin with, if they really are just saying that they don't like any vegetables whatsoever, we may look at liquefying the foods at first rather than offering them whole. And, you know, what I would say with this is it's, you know, by liquefying the foods is we're getting those vitamins and nutrients in that they need. And this actually helps with changing the biochemistry of the body so that when that happens, then they get more used to the foods. And the more they eat it, the more they start to enjoy it. Okay, so another way from a nutritional point of view that I find extremely helpful is to offer probiotic or fermented foods to help heal the gut. It's a great way to heal the gut. So these are just some of the options that I often start with. So things like not just your normal coconut yogurt from you know, the health food store or you know, from cold storage. We're looking at a fermented probiotic yogurt. So the yogurts that you'll often find in the supermarket, yes, they will have probiotics in there, but they're not the types of strains of good bacteria that we're actually looking for. And they're nowhere near the quantity that we're looking for either. We would use things like fermented vegetables, kimchi, fermented dips and dressings. You know, to begin with most of my children, I try not to recommend too much things like kombucha and stuff like that, because it can be a little bit heavy in sugar. And, you know, we're trying to often reduce the sugars. So yeah, often I will recommend to start out with consuming small amounts of probiotic foods. So consuming these fermented foods and drinks, these allow all the live probiotics to move through the digestive tract. But the one thing I would say about if you haven't given your child probiotic foods before is that when you're introducing probiotics to your child, always just introduce one new probiotic food at a time. And if and wait for about 48 hours. And if there's any like negative reactions, then you can just observe like how they're actually responding to that over that period. You know, because sometimes when we're introducing probiotic or fermented foods too quickly, it can cause what we call like a Herxheimer reaction, which is just put simply like a detox reaction. You know, while it's like cleaning out the bad bacteria in the gut. So, and the other thing I would just note about probiotic foods in general is that not all probiotic foods are right for everyone. So, you know, if your child is particularly sensitive, it may be best to ask, you know, check in first before you start any of the probiotic foods. Okay. So in particular, you know, I was talking about the coconut yogurt. So I often recommend a super fermented coconut yogurt. And what I mean by this is that just making your own coconut yogurt at home by using a good bacteria starter. And so this will help with putting all of the essential gut bacteria, and it will help to increase the diversity levels of our good bacteria like bifidobacteria and lactobacillus. And I like it because it's using food as medicine rather than taking lots of supplements. So, you know, I am actually going to email everyone the recipe for this because it's very handy to have. And it's simply by using canned coconut cream. So the brand that I always recommend is IAM brand coconut cream, which is very easy to find here. Either the green tin, which is the cream, or the blue tin, which is the milk. And the reason why I'm being so particular about the brand is that not all coconut cream brands will actually thicken to make a yogurt. Some will stay quite runny, and that can be very like awkward to eat. And then the probiotic starter, so we want to try to get like a lactobacillus bifidobacteria starter, because not all probiotics you can actually ferment. So, I would recommend, so it needs to be one, like a probiotic, like lactobacillus and bifido always need to be kept in the fridge. So it would be a refrigerated type, not the soil-based probiotics. And you simply just open up one of the capsules, add the powder, add 2 tins of the coconut cream, just a tablespoon of sugar, and then you leave it to ferment for 24 hours. And after the fermentation, about like overnight in the fridge or 4 hours in the fridge to thicken. So I'm going to give you all the links, but I normally do use a yogurt maker. I just find that it's a lot safer. You just leave it plugged in overnight, and it's extremely easy. So I'm going to give you the link. I don't have any affiliations with this brand at all, but I'm going to give you the link to the one that I use because it is extremely easy. I've had mine for many years now, and it's never skipped a beat. And it's something that you can use ongoing. You can use the probiotic coconut yogurt as an ongoing thing to increase the good bacteria. So it's worthwhile investing in the yogurt maker. Okay. So you can use the coconut yogurt as part of your microbiome nutrition, and that's one of our probiotic foods. But also, the main thing when we're looking at microbiome is usually lots of fruit and vegetables, lots of prebiotic foods, and fermented foods to actually increase the good bacteria in there. And what I tend to find for most individuals is that adopting a gluten and dairy-free diet is very beneficial for the microbiome as well. And this is probably another topic for another day, but there's so much research about how gluten and dairy can actually cause inflammation, and by taking out these two foods, that they can have more alkaline approach, a beneficial approach on helping with digestion. So so when we're looking at the foundation of good gut health, it all begins with what we eat. And this is true at any age. So the earlier we can start our kids on healthier foods and trying to introduce some of these things like avocados and all of these things, the better. And the easier it is, the less likely for them that they'll become fussy eaters as well, and restrictive eating. Okay, so let's have a look. Quickly touch on like probiotics, okay, and using probiotics in the microbiome. So one of the main things I just wanted to highlight was that when we do buy probiotics, they need to be strain specific. And what I mean by this is that, you can get within each type of species of bacteria, say like lactobacillus or bifidobacteria, there are a multitude of strains. So for example, there are lots of different strains of a particular lactobacillus called Lactobacillus ruttii. And actually there's lots of evidence for one particular Lactobacillus ruttii that is used in bloating and like bacterial overgrowth in the small intestines. But then there's another Lactobacillus ruttii that's actually been studied to help with its effects in increasing oxytocin, and therefore helping with social skills and so we really need to be very targeted when we're working with probiotics. Is the main thing that I just wanted to point out for all of those people that are starting out, looking at probiotics. So, for example, with the Lactobacillus ruttii, the one that we're looking at for increasing oxytocin is Lactobacillus ruttii LOR2, I'm pretty sure it is. So it'll have a little, digits behind it, or there may be something like Lactobacillus rhamnosus, GG. You'll see the strain behind it. So we need to be very particular with that. And we're looking at treating probiotics for particular health outcomes. Okay, so I just wanted to give some tips as far as like probiotics. So when we're looking at giving probiotics to infants, ideally it's best to treat through the mother if they're breastfeeding. So these are actually some very strain specific. You can see what I'm talking about by like Lactobacillus reuteri, DSM, and then the number. So that particular probiotic or strain has been studied for that particular like bloating and digestive issues. The L-fermentum at the top there is actually a really good probiotic that has been researched for helping to restore balance of good bacteria in breast milk that have been maybe disrupted by antibiotics. So for example, if there was antibiotics given at the birth or other external factors, it helps, actually the L-fermentum helps to relieve breast pain and discomfort associated with mastitis. I've actually looked it up for you. So I found a brand that keeps that particular, that has that particular strain. So, and we do have it at the clinic if you would like to invest in some of those probiotics. But that particular one has also been found to reduce the reoccurrence of mastitis as well. So, and the bottom one, L. rhamnosus, so you would use these for very targeted reasons. So the L. rhamnosus LGG in particular had been found to be helpful in C-section babies in particular. And it's also used for reduction of like allergies and eczema, asthma, food intolerances and sensitivities and the likes as well. So for formula-fed infants, you know, when I recommending probiotics for them, this can simply be added into their formula. Open up the capsule and add it into the formula, or if it's a powder already. But bifidobacteria as a group of bacteria. So I'm not putting like one particular strain down, but just in general, because normally bifido would be, you know, increased through breastfeeding. So having like a multi-strained bifidobacteria would be ideal, and it could be simply dissolved into the formula. And again, that Lactobacillus rhamnosus could also be given to help with the immune response. Okay, so testing the microbiome can actually be a bit tricky. So, you know, I would recommend that for any children 3 and over, we would recommend testing, and this is because you know, by the age of 3, your child has established essentially their stable or adult microbiome. Okay, so so from around children 3 and over, you could look at testing their microbiome if you feel that would be helpful for them. So at the clinic, we actually test the diversity of the gut microbiome. It's called microbiome sequencing. The sequencing, because what it's actually doing is, and I gave you an insight on one of the previous screens when we were looking at the corona, that's actually part of this test. So that was like the pie graph where we're looking at all of the different bacteria, but it identifies all your microbes that traditional culturing methods miss. So it gives us a more complete understanding of the microbial communities, or the bacteria, good and bad, looking at what the types of bacteria are associated with, or and also if the gut permeability and leaky gut as well. So, you know, when it comes to testing the bacteria, the type of testing is extremely important because of this. You know, the traditional culturing methods, this is where bacteria are actually grown on a, like on a petri dish or a media that will support. However, many bacteria cannot actually be cultured. So this is why the culturing actually gives us an inaccurate view of the microbe community. And often when we're using tests where they're culturing like on a particular medium, it'll just say high, medium or low. You know, it's not actually giving us a full picture. So high for one person I've seen could be 40%, like we looked at for that young boy, or it could be 5%, you know, so it can be extremely inaccurate as far as, you know, looking at what levels and, you know, the time of treatment and what is the best way to go about treatment. And for this reason, as a result, over the past 2 decades, when we're looking at microbiome research, it's become increasingly dependent on using DNA to examine our gut flora, and this is obviously because of the accuracy. We can see everything basically, not just what we can grow in the lab. So this is where it makes it sets it apart from that. And testing, as I'm sure all of you are extremely aware, is very important, because if we have accurate testing, then we can hit the nail on the head as far as where we need to focus our attention. So, rebalancing and replenishing, targeting individual needs, looking at appropriate prebiotics and probiotics, and it could be, for example, that if there is a lot of inflammation present, we need to work more with anti-inflammatories, like really target anti-inflammatories, rather than another person may need more support around sugar balance. So, we'd look at more things to help with balancing blood sugar levels and diet. So this is, where it can become like it's extremely important to actually test, so that we can see what types of bacteria we need to put in, all of these types of things. And then that has the added impact of giving us insight into addressing the biochemistry of the body as well. So, when I've looked at feedback, like most reported improvements, I would say like immunity is definitely one of them. Along with that comes better nutrition and increased variety of foods, improved mood, and reduced anxiety levels. Obviously, all the digestive functions will improve, like improved bowel functions, but also concentration and improved learning at school are some of the most reported improvements. So with that, I'm going to finish up now. I'd just like to check in and see if there are any questions that anyone may have.
We have a few questions for you,
Okay.
Alicia. So we're starting from the top. First of all,
Sure.
will the slides be emailed to everybody?
I can check in. I'll ask, and I know that they're sending out a couple of emails tomorrow, so I can check in and ask with that. Like for certain, I know that they've already got something put together, even with the recipe for the fermented food, for the coconut yogurt and everything that I was just telling you about. So I'll check in for you.
Yeah, perfect. Another question from Steph is: does kefir yogurt do the same as fermented coconut yogurt does?
It's usually just that it has different species of probiotics in it. So I would say like the fermented coconut yogurt that I was just talking about would actually be better, because if you're getting a probiotic, it's starting off with a very good quality probiotic, and then you're getting all of those particular strain-specific species that are in there. So I would actually say the coconut yogurt would be a better way.
Does that taste better?
The coconut yogurt does. I mean, if you feel like it can be a bit rich if you get the coconut cream, okay? Right. But if you get the milk, it's a bit less rich. And the tip that I will give you is that you can also add the coconut yogurt into anything. You don't have to take it neat just like yogurt. You could mix it into anything you like and change the flavor, put fruit in there, anything like that. So you can make it taste nice. Yeah.
Perfect. Second question. Could you recommend a broad spectrum probiotic for toddlers? I think you had that on your list, or that was only for infants.
Yes. Okay. For toddlers, I would actually say, so from toddlers, a brand that I would recommend is, there's one, it's just trying to get them in Singapore can be a little bit hard, but there's one called Orthoplex, and it's called Multigen Probiotic. And for a toddler, I would actually recommend that. It is, a lot of these ones that are really good only come in capsules, okay? But you can open up the capsule and take it that way.
Okay, so another question from Allison. If the gut is unwell and the nutrients are not absorbed, there's no point in taking the vitamins, supplements, fermented foods, etc. So what diet would you recommend to reset the gut?
Yes. Well, I would say that we have to start somewhere, okay? And a lot of these people they will absorb some. It's not like they're not going to absorb anything, you know, out of all the vitamins and minerals. So I would actually say, even though their digestion isn't optimal, you know, we want to start with trying to put little bits back in there at a time. We wouldn't try to flood it with lots. And this can be very individualized for each person. But the diet, I would actually say, just as a very generalized rule of thumb, because it really does depend on how, like, all the signs and symptoms that that child is presenting with. But if you simply start by looking at the diet and trying to cut out all of the junk foods, the nasty foods, even if it's just for a certain amount of time, trying to take out the gluten and dairy, that's where I would begin. That just takes the pressure off the digestion.
Okay. Question from Barbara.
Yes.
Recommendation for probiotics with teenagers on a healthy, diverse diet who still have digestive issues. Constipation is one of those.
Okay, if they're getting constipation, even if they're on a healthy diet, all of that, I would still maybe try to put them on a gentle fiber as well, like a fiber supplement, because making sure that they're getting enough water, enough fiber. But a probiotic, Seeking Health does quite a good probiotic, and it has lots of lactobacillus and bifido in there, like just as a diverse probiotic. So they could take the Seeking Health probiotic at like 1 capsule a day.
Okay. A question from Vishal. Is the microbiome sequencing a blood test?
No, it's a stool test.
Oh.
Extremely easy. So no blood, and even even within that particular test, all it is a smear for cotton wool tip. So that's all you need to sample of the stool, and then it just simply goes into a test tube. So it's a very small amount. It's very easy to test.
Okay. One question from Shuita. Recommendations for kids with irritable bowel syndrome and sensitivity to dairy, gluten, soy, and eggs. Recommendations as in, like, I think she means diet. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I would, if someone is getting those amounts of food intolerances and sensitivities, I would definitely look at testing to see what's actually going on in the gut. Because one thing that I found is, even though there may be a diagnosis of IBS or, you know, these types of things, we need to try to delve a little bit deeper to actually see what's going on with that. And, you know, obviously to begin with, we would take those foods out, but we want to try to build up the digestion and the stamina so that those sensitivities aren't so severe.
Okay. Question from Anjali. Hi, Alicia. Thanks for such a useful session. Thank you very much. A few questions for you. Do you recommend apple cider vinegar? And another one is, if you cut dairy for kids, are there any concerns on not taking as much calcium?
It's a very, very good question. So I do recommend apple cider vinegar. It depends on the severity of the symptoms. I always say cider vinegar, especially over a long period of time, just to be careful of your teeth and your enamel on your teeth, because you know, we don't want it to, once you lose your enamel on your teeth, you can't get it back. So, you know, just maybe drink it through a straw or something like that. Just be a bit careful with that. But I do recommend apple cider vinegar. The other thing with the dairy is that, you know, when we look at reducing dairy, it's not at the expense of just ignoring our calcium levels. So there are actually a whole list of foods, and I do go through that in quite detail with people about other non-dairy sources of calcium that you can get. And actually a lot of these foods, like our greens and seaweed and all of these things, are actually very easy to absorb the calcium out of those sources. So I think it's just about kind of changing our kind of food habits and looking at these things, like when we go to add these into our diet to help with calcium.
Okay. One question from Michelle. Has it been shown that keeping up with these healthy gut, that these is less of a chance to develop an autoimmune disease? And can these tips be used to help treat autoimmune disease?
Oh, most certainly. I think, you know, this is an area, like when we're looking at the microbiome, especially the gut microbiome, it's exploding with new research, and I'm sure you know the audience hears about microbiome this, that all the time. There's a lot of noise around this particular topic, but I would say most certainly it has a very strong link. You know, this is the first place I would start if someone was worried about developing autoimmune disease, especially if it's in the family. And it has that there are a lot of strong research that links working with the gut microbiome to help with autoimmunity.
One question from Karen. How long does it take for C-section babies' gut biome to re-establish? And is there any evidence to suggest that they may have biome issues later in life? Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. So I would say, how long does it take? I don't know if there's an exact amount of time or not. I think it really would also depend on like the other environmental factors that are happening for that particular individual. But I did read some research there where they feel that even the babies that were born by C-section, that by the time that they're 7 years of age, they couldn't notice much of a difference there with that. So, but it would also depend on all of the other things that you're doing in between that time as well. And sorry, what was the other part of the question, Susan?
Hold on. Is there any evidence to suggest that they may have some issues later in life?
Yeah, there is evidence, and that's kind of what I was referring to. So, I mean, actually, the evidence, there's still research that's actively, like they're in the middle of this research right now with the C-section babies, you know, looking at, you know, different methods like, you know, implementing probiotics and things like that. So yeah, definitely this is like an ongoing area of research. So some of it I can't clearly give you an answer to, but you know, they have linked like C-section births to an increase, and this is actually, there is quite a lot of research in this area, to like allergies, like allergies, asthma, and eczema.
Okay. Another question from Joanna. Is there a need for a toddler to take probiotic supplements if she's still being breastfed and shows no sign of digestive issues?
Well, I would say not necessarily. If there's no signs of digestive issues, like, you know, when we went through the Bristol stool chart, there's no like distended stomach or anything like that. I don't think that there's necessarily any need. Maybe, you know, mum could take some probiotics and it could go through the breast milk. But, you know, the only thing I would say is like, there's no like severe need to take in that type of instance. But the only thing that I would say is that, you know, and not to alarm, but we do have a lot of ongoing toxins in our environment at the moment. So, you know, like if someone's not filtering their water, these types of things, yeah. So, you know, maybe every now and again, it might be good to include a probiotic from that point of view.
Yeah. And is it dangerous to take probiotics without taking the test, I guess?
Oh, no, really. No. Very gentle. Yeah. They wouldn't be able to sell them if there was, you know, any issues like that. So.
And so one question here from Katie, can the materials that you're going to be sending over include what foods are probiotic?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And then another one for Moria. What tests can we do to check if someone has a leaky gut or if the gut is thinning? Can the gut be healed totally once it's leaking?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I may not have been clear, but actually that microbiome test that I was just showing you, it does identify leaky gut on that particular test. So that can actually be, that's one way of doing it. And yes, I have seen people's gut you know, heal after, it's all about like the types of probiotics and prebiotics that particular person needs to take. And it can be a bit higher dosage sometimes, so it's slowly working with the person to increase the dosage over time.
Okay. A question from Michelle. Is it primary diet and a good probiotic that balances the... Oops, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
These questions are coming in like hotcakes. They jump around. Is it primarily the diet and good probiotic that balances the flora, or do we need to take supplements to kill the bad bacteria? Also, is it determinal to take probiotics if you already had been diagnosed with SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say that, this is, probiotics aren't for everyone. Okay, so there are, and this is where it comes back to being very specific with the strains and types of probiotics, because we used to think when people had that issue of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and there can be different schools of thought as well, but that in general, no probiotics are recommended. Okay, but they are now seeing that certain species of probiotics are actually beneficial in SIBO, but you need to be very particular, because if you're taking too many probiotics for some people that have that particular condition, that will actually irritate the condition more and cause the issues that are already there, like bloating and all of these types of things. So you do have to be careful if there is severe bloating, these types of things, and then I wouldn't recommend lots of fermented foods and probiotics in that particular case. But predominantly, I see that SIBO is in adults, predominantly.
Okay. And the question from Joanna, is there a link between gut health and obesity?
Yes, most certainly, I would say. Yeah, definitely. The types of gut bacteria actually change. And there's been quite a lot of research in this particular area as well, where they've looked at germ-free mice and then, put the bacteria from the overweight mice into the other one. And, so there's definitely a lot of research behind that it does.
Okay. One question is, any probiotic you'd recommend for general well-being for adults and kids? I think, when you go to the drugstore or the pharmacy, there's just like a whole wall of probiotics, and it's like a, rocket science to kind of figure out which one you have to take.
I know. It's really, it can be very frustrating. It's like another world. What I might do is I might, on that email that they do send out, I might put just some, like for adult toddlers, that type of thing, because I think, the brand, like I don't have any affiliations with any brands or anything like that, but the brand can be quite important with especially probiotics, because, sometimes if you're getting them mailed and they're not kept, temperature sensitive, temperature stable, they can slowly, the bacteria amount will decrease, they'll die. So, you want to make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting as well. So I might just recommend some brands from that point of view. One tip I'll give you is you'll know if the probiotic that you've bought if it's saying it's meant to be in the fridge and then you buy it, okay, and then you go to ferment with it, and say you go to make the coconut yogurt. If the bacteria are dead, then it won't ferment. So that's one way you can test.
Okay, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Another question from me. If the kid is a fussy eater but actually eats healthy. Sorry, that was my dog delivery guy coming. Sorry. If the kid is a fussy eater but actually eats healthy, just one-sided, for example, oatmeal with fruits every day, only broccoli and carrots for veggies, do I need to be worried? Wow, you're lucky your kids eat broccoli.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I would say, I would definitely be less worried with that diet, because, but I would still try slowly but surely. I wouldn't be worried, but I would at least try to get some extra bits and pieces in there just to get a bit of diversity with the food. But most certainly I wouldn't be too worried.
Okay. One question from Tian. If my 18-month-old baby has type 4 poop, but she only poops every second day, is she considered to be constipated?
Yes, I would say so. It's not severe constipation. It's great that it's coming out as a type 4, but if it's every second day, the bowels are a bit sluggish.
Okay. A question from Kai. Can you recommend where to buy preservative-free kimchi in Singapore, or could you recommend a recipe to make it at home? Could you add that in the list?
Kimchi. Yeah, I'll add that in the list. Yeah, I'm making a note. Preservative-free kimchi. Yeah, okay.
Another question is it possible that we pass the bad or out of balance gut bacteria to our babies if we had a C-section?
If you've had a C-section, no, but they're getting most of their bacteria then from the environment and the hospital and from the mum's skin usually.
Mhm.
So it's just normally a different makeup of bacteria.
Okay, and another question here is going on the baby thing. If my 18-month-old baby has type 4 poop, but she only poops every, oh yeah, those, we had that one, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Another one is we make fresh fermented food commercially and handcrafted here in Singapore. I'm looking to see how to do the RNA sequencing for the foods. Could the testing method you mentioned be used for this as well?
I could check with the lab and see. I've never had that question before. I mean, it would be fantastic. I mean, how amazing would that be to be actually be able to see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'll get them to hook up with you guys.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. Okay, that was it for questions.
Wow,
I
that's
think
great.
that all our questions have been answered, which is fantastic.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for all the questions, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. It was really, really good. I got
My pleasure.
I got all my notes here. So a
Oh,
whole
good.
two pages of notes, which is fantastic. So if you know the people who've signed up today have more questions, they can always email you, contact you. Yes, you will
Yes, they
include
can.
everything on the email.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, any questions at all, just get in contact. And yeah, we will get back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alicia. It was
Thank you.
amazing, and thank you for all the information today. And I
My
hope
pleasure.
everyone, you know, were well informed and knowledgeable a little bit more on kids' health gut. Thank you so much, at
Thank
least I
you.
am.
And
I know.
appreciate everyone coming. That's great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.